Welcome to the Buy Box Experts podcast. We bring to light the unique opportunities brands face in today's e-commerce world.
And welcome to the Buy Box Experts podcast. This is Eric Stopper. Today's episode is brought to you by Buy Box Experts. Buy Box Experts takes ambitious brands and makes them unbeatable. And listen, I know you're stressed. I know that the senior management at your company doesn't understand the marketing tactics that you want to employ. They don't understand that you need more budget. They don't get it. Come and talk to me and let's get on the phone call with them and I'll just show them the numbers. Go to buyboxexperts.com, click on the free analysis button. You'll be connected with me or a member of my team and we will help you out. There's no reason to stress on Amazon. This is supposed to be fun. We're making money. This episode is part of a 10-part series that we're doing with the geniuses at Kenshoo. We thought to bring together our collective knowledge in a way that was fun and educationally indispensable. Today, I'm joined by Julia Nelson, Director of E-com Expert Services and Enablement, and Peter Phillips, Sales Director for E-commerce at Kenshoo. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Eric. Good to be here.
Thank you, Eric.
So today we're talking about Amazon Share. And more specifically, we're talking about the anatomy of Amazon's first page when it comes to advertising. So, you guys you're representing Kenshoo. Kenshoo's an advertising first platform. But we're going to talk about the differences between organic and paid, and then how these things are arrayed on the page, and then how you can utilize them in order to help your brand perform as well as possible on Amazon. And so one of the first questions that I have for y'all is, inside of the Kenshoo tool, there's something that gives you share of voice. And it tells you, like, of the people that are advertising around you, how many of the clicks go your way, how many of the sales go your way. Kind of explain that part of the tool so that everyone gets a good understanding of what that does.
Yeah, I can start with that. So it's called Brand Insights, and essentially for a given advertising account or a given brand, you would select a certain amount of keywords that you want to focus on. And from there, we'll start to track overall share of voice for those given keywords over time. So then you can start to slice and dice all of that data for a given keyword, what is paid and what is organic, and then how you measure up to your competitors. So you can see your share, maybe you're overdriving on organic, and then you have 20% towards paid. And you can compare that relative to the other competitors for that given search term to see how your investment measures up.
And that's like, how often am I appearing at the top? How often am I appearing next to a competitor? Will it tell me that, like adjacency to other people? Man.
Yeah, you can slice that. You can look at the whole page cumulatively, and then you can also break it down by the first 5 positions. So a nuance with those first 5 positions is it's going to be a bit different depending on your category. So those first 3 positions could be paid, or the first 4 could be paid. And then the 5th is typically always organic. But that is kind of varying and something that Amazon has been testing out as far as how many positions there are that are paid at the top of search results.
And then this is a conversation I've had a bunch of different times, but how many of those positions actually matter to the customer? Yeah, I mean, are people scrolling past the first 5 products? I know for a fact I've been on the second and third pages of searches, but that might just be because I'm in this space. How important is it to be at the top?
So top of search is typically very important, and you can look at that from a few different angles. You can look at your organic placement. So if you're nowhere on the first page organically, then paid top of search is very important because of that visibility. And then also you can compare your advertising metrics. So typically top of search is your top performing placement compared to other or product detail pages within sponsored products. So it can be really costly, but it's also the biggest driver from a return standpoint, as well as just general revenue.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'm trying to think of an analogy that you guys brought up prior to our recording, where when I walk through an aisle at a traditional brick and mortar retail spot, I look around, right, and I have general ideas of what's in that aisle. Sometimes I look at the titles of the foods that are in that aisle, but mostly, like, if I look over and I see some brown sugar, like, I'm in the baking aisle. You know what I mean? I'm a simple consumer. At my eye level, those brands have paid to be there, right? In a grocery store. Like, how does that work on the retail side, ignoring Amazon for a second?
Yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed the analogy between brick and mortar operations and what you see in the digital world. For traditional retail, shoppers may not realize, but brands have these shopper marketing budgets that they are investing with retailers, and they're buying the end cap, the placements on the end of the aisle, or they're buying the shelf space that's at eye level, as you mentioned, so that they are more visible and they can get more sales. They have to pay a premium for that placement. And you talk to brands that are looking at Amazon, looking at sponsored products, and maybe they've been selling on Amazon for a few years, maybe not, and they start to think, why do I have to pay for a sale where I would have shown up at the top of the search results anyway? And the answer is, if you're not paying for it, if Coke doesn't buy that eye level placement on aisle 7, then Pepsi's going to get it. So it is a necessary part of a successful program to try to grab those paid placements, in addition to boosting your organic rank and showing up in those organic placements as well.
And now it's hard to string this analogy together, completely apples to apples, where a sponsored product is showing up on the next to highest shelf where everybody can see you, and a sponsored brand is like a whole piece of the aisle that's only your products. But I'm wondering, is there an end cap to Amazon search? Is there a way to just get the customer on their way to the checkout line? Or has Amazon really not quite gotten that far, almost interrupting their purchase process to upsell them, so to speak? Are there end caps like that on Amazon?
I think the closest equivalent, you could say, sponsored brand is really a premium placement at the top of the search results page. If you're looking at, capturing them as they're going through the checkout, then I'd say the product display ad placement right below the buy box is somewhat similar. So those things are different ways that you can sort of advertise a product that might be category adjacent. You can put that in the product display ad placement right below the buy box. So if I'm buying if I'm buying a new Bluetooth mouse, I might need batteries for that. So I might want to run that placement right under the buy box. I don't know if there are other successful strategies that Julia has seen advertisers employ, but those are the ones that come to mind.
Yeah, as far as other opportunities to target specific ASINs, so kind of the analogy of you're in the checkout line and trying to divert those sales or basket build. In addition to product display or now sponsored display, there's PDP targeting within sponsored products as well. So you can layer that a couple ways. You can target at a keyword level and then increase your bid on PDP placements, meaning that you're going to show up for in-category items on that detail page. So those placements are not quite the same as below the buy box, but there are multiple carousels within the PDP that you could show up for sponsored products. As well as we've started to see sponsored brands placements show up there as well. They're kind of right below the product images. This is just released, so there's not a ton of reporting insights yet, but kind of opening up the ad inventory for sponsored brands to also include the same placements as sponsored products, so that ad type can also scale. And then building on top of just search advertising altogether on Amazon, there's also DSP and then even sponsored display for kind of light retargeting. So you could retarget in-market products within the same product or within the same category as your products, or even retargeting consumers that did not purchase on your ASIN to begin with, and follow them through that purchase funnel until they come back to Amazon and hopefully complete the purchase.
Man, I'm trying to imagine this. If I'm Walmart, if I'm selling to Walmart, I've been doing that for a while in my business. I've got all this kind of figured out, right? There's a finite amount of places that I can put my product, and there's bids that I can make for those. But on Amazon, it sounds like it's like Wild West, and they're always trying out new things. How does someone stay on top of all the different places that an ad can go? Or does the automatic campaigns, do they just do that now? They just put ads everywhere and populate you in all these special places? Or do you have to deliberately go in and I want this to advertise, at the keyword level, at the category level, under the buy box? How do you find all these things?
Yeah, there's kind of two silos to that. So they're all sponsored products, so it's all the same ad inventory, whether it's keyword driven or automatic or even product attribute targeting where you can target a category or individual ASIN. They all are vying for the same position within sponsored products. And then the second layer would be the position adjustment. So that's where you can prioritize top of search or you can prioritize product detail pages. So those kind of levers in conjunction with how you're targeting is how you can isolate your strategies.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I've steered you guys. We're talking about the buy box right now. We want to talk about just like the search page. When people type in a term and products show up, we call that the SERP, SERP. When they're searching for that, I want to understand two things. They're questions that I get a lot. The first one is for the brands that already have some pretty good organic brand search. I get fought on like whether or not we should be doing ads on their own brand name because they're like, look, you know, they're going to buy my product anyways. They're searching for it. But Peter, a second ago, you said that like if you're not bidding for it, someone else is. And so I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on the branded side of things. Is this a best practice? What kind of data indicators are going to tell you if you should be advertising for your own brand name?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I think everybody should be, just because, like we have been discussing, if you're not doing it and you're a recognizable brand, somebody else is going to bid on that. So if, you know, Nike doesn't take the placement, Reebok's going to, or Adidas, or, you know, the list goes on. And so I think the good news for advertisers is that if someone is searching for your brand name, your organic relevance or your relevance overall is going to be greater, such that you might not have to bid as aggressively, you know, to earn those placements, in which case, you know, you'll show up right at the top. You might show up in a sponsored result and an organic result right next to each other. And how great is that? Because it just means you're taking up more of the shelf, more of the eye space for the shopper to then select one of your products. And so, you know, that's going to also drive a good return, because if the shopper is searching specifically for your product, you know, not only are you more relevant, but the shopper is very likely to convert on your product. So while it feels that you might have gotten that sale naturally, if somebody else swoops in because you didn't take the placement, you may have lost that sale, where the investment to get it was going to be, you know, minimal compared to a generic category term, and the chance of conversion is going to be very high. So it feels sometimes like I shouldn't have to pay to play on my own brand, but in reality, you're really missing out on a lot of potential sales if you're not.
Julia, anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, from kind of another angle as a way to somewhat compromise with that pushback from brands is, say you've got, you know, a few ASINs that rank really high organically for your given brand, but you have a new product launch. So maybe prioritize those ASINs for your branded terms. It's going to be less expensive, high returns, and you're also getting that exposure for that new product that likely ranks very low organically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. The one that comes to mind is there's a company that sells like ginger chews, and there's a branded name for those ginger chews. And I saw that they were advertising their ginger juice for the ginger chews because the ginger chews already had the first spot. And so I think that's really compelling. I had never thought of that. So that's the branded side. The unbranded side is a huge headache. And I get questions all the time about campaign structure and like bid optimization and just everything that you could think of when it comes to bidding on just like a generic keyword that's related to your product. I want to get a sense for how Kenshoo views the strategy when approaching top of search for a brand, in the context of which products to put at the top of those kinds of lists, how long to run those ads. I think we could get into a lot of the meat of this, but what are some of the core philosophies that Kenshoo has when approaching the problem of like, okay, how do we get to the top of search?
Yeah, I can start with that. So I think first and foremost, you would isolate what keywords are most important to your brand and to your category and where you want to focus those efforts. So typically, that could be 20 keywords, sometimes less, certainly much more narrow than your broader keyword set, but prioritizing what keywords you want to go after. So putting those into a single campaign, isolating which ASINs you want to support against those keywords. So that's, from my perspective, is weighing the organic placements versus the ASINs that are not showing up organically already. But then also taking the perspective that Peter brought up earlier, if you're ranking high organically, you have a higher relevancy, so it typically can be a little less expensive. So there's certainly a deeper analysis there on making sure you're using the right ASIN assortment with those keywords. And as well as other inputs, like it's a new product launch, or you have a deal or promotion, or it's a bundle or something. So whatever those ASINs are that you want to associate with those keywords, putting them in their own campaign. I would recommend single ASIN ad groups so you can get more granular data. And then from there, since you have them in your own campaign, you can then overdrive on the top of search placement adjustment that we talked about earlier, ensuring that you're spending majority of your campaign daily budget on that specific placement.
Peter, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think from an advertising perspective and keyword strategy, Julia, that's a very comprehensive analysis there. I would take it even a step farther, and I don't want to get us too far off the path of how this relates to SERP and keyword advertising, but if you want to be at the top, you also have to make sure that you're going to be Prime eligible, right? So typically that means our products are either vendor or we're in FBA, and also we got to have good content. Our titles have to be formatted correctly, our bullets have to be relevant, our descriptions have to be strong. So everybody always talks about the Amazon flywheel. You provide a good shopping experience, you are a highly relevant product, you get good reviews after the purchase, and the cycle, the flywheel starts to spin a little faster for you. It's an overused cliche potentially, but I do think that's true. I mean, anytime you want to show up at the top, you got to make sure that you're tackling the program holistically, which, working with you guys at Buy Box Experts, we've seen you do amazing things in, providing operational consulting and efficiencies through content development and marketing. And then, of course, with Kenshoo, I think with our partnership and the ability to really get granular in how you're managing the keyword advertising, all of those things put together will eventually drive these products and these listings toward the top of the SERP. And it takes time, that which can be something that is hard to grasp in a digital environment. People want things to happen immediately because that's what we're used to, but you do have to build up your brand and your relevance over time. And I think, everything we've addressed here is the exact way to get there.
Yeah. And on a previous episode in this series, Julia talked about, the more money that you are able to spend through the Kenshoo program and just on Seller Central too, the more data that you're going to have, the more statistically significant the data is. And so time is a big factor. And so the brands that maybe are just really struggling to break through this barrier where they can't really own a keyword, how long, and what budget? It probably depends greatly on the keyword and the category, but what are some general rules of thumb to help somebody know that they're on the right track, that they are actually slowly working their way up the rank and that their keyword strategy is good?
Yeah, I think a lot of the approaches we've taken are mentioned here as far as tactically with your campaign structure, but then also being able to monitor that in brand insights to see what kind of movement you're making on a paid and organic share perspective so that you can see the fruits of your labor from your campaign. And then from there, you can understand what the CPCs cost for your product to show up at top of search. And then you can start to kind of build out a larger budget on what it would take to build your share of voice at that certain CPC.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Peter, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the share metric is highly relevant here. And also some people will look at, total ACOS in the absence of incrementality testing on Amazon because you can't geo-target. I think that looking at your overall sales as you make advertising investments to understand, yes, my ad attributed sales are increasing, but am I seeing a corresponding lift in my organic sales? If so, and you're also seeing your visibility increase, then I would say your advertising is not only driving more sales, but it's driving incremental sales. And I think that's something that's really important to most advertisers.
Yeah, I would say that those are some of the insights that if I was running internally the account for somebody like inside of a brand, that I would want to be reporting on that to my senior leadership. I think that everybody in the organization would care about those kinds of metrics. And to this point in time, Amazon hasn't really like made that super easy to just report on all of that, but Kenshoo has. And I do kind of want to like break away and talk about some of the different insights that Kenshoo can give you that are above and beyond what Seller Central is able to provide you. And so in addition to like the brand insights, which is a tool that might even have some things that we haven't talked about in it, but what are some of the other insights that Kenshoo can give you when you're looking at this kind of top of search, share of voice, how my ads are actually pushing me to the top? What are some things that I can't find in Seller Central that I can find in Kenshoo?
Yeah, there's a lot of specific Amazon reports within Kenshoo that are going to be specific to placements as far as eligibility, slicing and dicing your data any which way you'd like, historical data. There's a lot of those kind of in the weeds reports that you just can't get within Seller Central or Amazon advertising. But really all of that aggregated together and the scalability of being able to connect that into a dashboard where you can integrate all of your other data sources as well, like your top line sales that Peter mentioned. So then you can start to build out a holistic reporting suite so that you can understand the relationships between those things and then make advertising pivots accordingly. A lot of it is just making sure you're aggregating the data appropriately. And that's what Kenshoo allows you to do. And certainly our product is moving in that direction as well, as far as making retail insights and inputs and delivering those as actions within advertising.
So you've mentioned like not getting myopic. Mm-hmm. Everyone that listens to this, hello, you're beautiful. They have so many things on their plate, and they want to know like the minimum metrics that they absolutely have to look at to make a decision on an advertising campaign. What are your top three? They don't need to be the same, but what are your top three when looking at a campaign and understanding how to improve it?
I can take a swipe at that. I mean, I think, ACOS, or as it's more commonly known on other channels, return on ad spend, is usually the top consideration, especially if you are not, a Fortune 500 company with really deep pockets. Then you got to make sure you're getting a decent return. And then the second one, I think, is top line sales. And sometimes top line is, the number one slot. But, we talked about the flywheel, and you can't really get it spinning without some velocity in sales. So I think top line is really important. And then the third is the share of voice. Amazon doesn't provide those metrics, but Kenshoo and there are other sources out there that help with those metrics as well. And I think that they're really important to help you understand the correlation between paid and organic placement, like we've been talking about.
Julia, anything you would add to that list? What are your three?
Yeah, it's tough. I think I'd want to hear input on what the goals are. If you are a new brand on Amazon with no relevancy or anything like that, then your return might not be so great on your advertising campaigns when you first get off the ground, because you need to be able to prove that relevancy. Or if you don't have reviews on your product listing, and you need to kind of overdrive on advertising to accumulate those reviews. So while that's always important, we want to take into account the lens of the brand on if they're new to market, or if they are a more veteran brand on Amazon. So I'd say that's very important. I think conversion rate also is something to keep in mind, because from that's kind of the activity metric that's going to drive the justification for increases in overall investment. So if that's very low, then there's less margin for error, versus if you can kind of find that sweet spot where your conversion rate is in a healthy place, then you can kind of justify that increase in ad spend and be a bit more confident that you can support legitimate sales behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all of those. So I have a multi-dimensional question, and I hope that it's not too confusing for the listener or for you guys. But in the there was it's called RE Mars. It's this convention that Amazon puts on with all of the AI people around the world to come and just talk about AI. And Amazon always puts on this big display, and so Jeff Wilke walked on the stage, and he talked about the early machine learning algorithms that Amazon set up to use what he called a primitive collaborative filtering algorithm, where it just takes all the preferences of everybody and throws them into this robot who then organizes them. He also then says that they combined it with heuristics to give you the search results that you have today. And heuristics are mental shortcuts, right? So what Wilke is saying essentially is that when people are searching on Amazon, they're not making great decisions. They're using very small pieces of your listing to make the decision as to whether or not they want to click on you. And so I'm going to go back to another point that we made earlier, which was you have to approach this like a buyer in the retail store, where you're buying as much space as possible and you're trying to make it so that it's as easy as possible for people to find and put their product in your cart. And in order to do that, you can't just advertise a junk listing, right? Obviously, it needs to be optimized, but I see all the time how people just copy each other. All the listings are just the same. The main picture looks the same. The titles all pretty much looks the same. And so I wanted to kind of get some insights into how you guys view the holistic management of Amazon and how you can make it so that your listing stands out from everybody else at the top of search. What are some of the strategies that you would use to help our listeners craft a better top of search strategy from the listing standpoint?
Yeah, I guess starting with that broader point around how the A9 algorithm was constructed. Of course, there's the known universe of things that we can control, and then there are the things that Jeff Wilke was talking about with collaborative filtering and heuristics. And I would say, the known universe is sort of what we've touched on quite often through this conversation. Product relevance, your keyword presence, and your category and things like that. Some of what happens behind the scenes that we might not have a full understanding of when it comes to the A9 algorithm, are they taking into account how long someone is browsing a listing? Even if it's got high relevance and it's got a decent conversion rate to start out, if it's a high price ticket item like a computer monitor or something of that nature, and people are only looking at it for 5 seconds, maybe they can sort of surmise that or deduce that people are not going to continue purchasing that product because they're not engaging with it. Higher ticket higher priced item needs greater engagement usually to complete the purchase cycle. So that's just one example of where those types of heuristics, those types of mental shortcuts might play into their algorithm. And that's smart, right? Because that's how we as humans make decisions more quickly. We take these shortcuts. So they're sort of playing on some of our tendencies in order to show us the right products. So I think it's going to depend on your category, but overall, I think, you have to have something that is very engaging for someone. If it's a pack of gum, then maybe a short description or a low amount of time spent on page before purchase is not going to be an issue. If it's a more expensive product, maybe we need to flesh out some enhanced brand content to a greater degree. We need to have product comparison tables. We need to engage in DSP retargeting to try and keep these shoppers engaged. And this is just sort of one fraction of the pie when it comes to the different elements that might be involved across different products and categories. But I think overall, consider what your product is, consider what category you're in, consider how much engagement it's going to take to convert that shopper. And then, I think you can build a strategy around that.
That's great. Julia, anything to add?
Yeah, I think Peter covered off on some really great points. And this is, a bit of a stretch here, but just something that's piqued my interest lately is the post beta from Amazon as well. And just kind of speculating here on, how they're breaking down given images and that you're able to shop from those images and then it's showing up on your detail page as well, both in reference to engagement on the product detail page, but also potentially on how they're breaking down the algorithm for engagement at an image level. So they can take those insights from a social perspective. So the feed that you are essentially transposing on your detail page now. And then Amazon can start to aggregate some learnings there and have that play into the algorithm in the future, who knows. I think that's just kind of an interesting pivot in having Amazon kind of tell that cross-channel story on its own detail pages.
Guys, this has been great. So there is so much information that needs to be digested, and there are decisions that need to be made for these advertising campaigns for all the brands that are listening. Obviously, a conversation with Kenshoo is a great idea. Come and talk to us at BuyBox Experts. We would love to help you build out these strategies, because I've heard numbers thrown around where if you can dominate like 5 positions in the top of a search term, that you'll get like 90% of the sales. So this is real, guys. Like, you've got to build these strategies out. You have to be really deliberate. Heed the advice of Peter and Julia, and let's make some better Amazon accounts together. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. To finish today's podcast, I want to share some final thoughts. For third-party sellers to be successful on Amazon, you've got to get reviews. We at BuyBox Experts are really big fans of the team over at Ecom Engine and its tools that help Amazon sellers simplify the process of soliciting reviews from customers who purchase their products. For more information, go to ecomengine.com. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for listening to the BuyBox Experts podcast. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web, and we'll see you next time.